Live to 23 Division, where police are providing an update on a fatal shooting outside North Albion Collegiate. Let's listen in live.
Today, I'm pleased to announce that the Toronto Police Service has made an arrest in the shooting deaths of Delroy George Parks, 61, and Seymour Gibbs, 46. As you may recall, on June 2nd, a group of people were gathered at the soccer game after a soccer game in the parking lot of the North Albion Collegiate Institute when they were indiscriminately shot at. They were playing games and enjoying each other's company. A pickup truck arrived in the parking lot and two suspects got out and shot at the group of men before fleeing the area. There was no known connection between the men and the suspects. 5 men sustained gunshot wounds and were rushed to nearby hospitals. Delroy George Parks died shortly after arriving at the hospital. A few days later, on Wednesday, June 5th, Seymour Gibbs died in the hospital from medical complications resulting from the injuries he sustained in the shooting. There were also 4 other people in the parking lot when the shooting occurred, who thankfully were not injured. A few hours later, in the same area, officers became involved in a stolen vehicle investigation. They arrested a male youth who was fleeing the vehicle, and through investigation, we've determined that he was one of the suspects involved in the shootings. Today, Toronto Police charged a 14-year-old male with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 7 counts of attempted murder. The amount of detail that I can provide is limited, as this is an ongoing investigation. I can't answer many of the questions you may have about the young person we've arrested or who the other suspects might be and the circumstances surrounding the shootings. What I can say is that these senseless acts of violence have resulted in the deaths of 2 innocent people and families who will forever be devastated by the loss of their loved ones. This was a mass shooting in our city, and we now know there are likely individuals out there who can tell us the identities of the other people responsible for these murders. We know you do not want these senseless acts of violence taking place in your city where innocent people are being killed. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention the seriousness of being an accessory to murder after the fact. Please, if you have any information that could help us arrest the other suspects involved, you can contact us at 416-808-2300, or you can call Crime Stoppers at 416-222-TIPS or 222tips.com. The Toronto Police Service prioritizes our response to gun violence because of the terrible impact it has on our communities. But we can't do it alone. If you have any information that could help us in this ongoing investigation, please contact police or Crime Stoppers. Thank you, and I'll now turn it over to Superintendent Ron Tavner.
Thank you, Phil. So, as the Detective Sergeant has said, this is an incredibly unbelievable act that took place on June the 2nd. And innocent people lost their lives. Many were shot, many were shot at. And the result today is of the 14-year-old youth being arrested. But this case is not over, as the Detective Sergeant has said. There's an ongoing investigation. And hopefully that will come to a conclusion in the not too distant future. But what I wanted to talk about today was the outpouring in the community. The community response was unbelievable, the support, the outpouring, and some of the people that came forward to help police in this investigation. We can't do it alone, and we need the help of the community. And this community is still grieving, and they will continue to grieve. I'd like to thank the Homicide Squad for the unbelievable work and the many, many hours that they put into this investigation, and the other officers from 23 Division and other areas that have been out in the community doing the things that they need to do to bring this investigation to a conclusion. So, again, without support, that affects all of us. So we need that help. We need the help of the community, calling Crime Stoppers, calling the Homicide Squad. Please help us solve this case and finish it. Thank you.
Detective Sergeant, about the You said he was arrested in relation to a stolen vehicle investigation. Are you alleging that he stole a vehicle after the mass shooting from one of the victims, or was that a separate investigation?
What I will say is this investigation is far from over. There's a lot more work for us to do, a lot more evidence that we have to go through, a lot of stuff that we have to look at. I don't want to comment too much about the steps or the chain of events that happened. I will confirm that he was arrested in relation to the stolen auto.
You can't say if this did this begin as an auto theft?
I don't want to comment on that.
Clearly, this is a big issue in our city. People, and these are innocent victims, so was this over a car that the shooting happened?
What I want to say about that is I'm here to investigate a homicide. I realize that there's stolen cars happening in the city every day, and perhaps Superintendent Tavner can comment on that.
So certainly, the whole auto theft, the carjackings, and those very serious offenses that are taking place throughout the city are something that the Toronto Police Service is attempting to address and alleviate the number of these types of occurrences that are happening across the city. But again, as the detective sergeant has said, we can't get into the evidentiary value of what's taken place to this point. There's certain things that will play out in the courts and other areas, but for now we can't go further into that.
If I remember correctly, initial statements made the day of the homicide was that the two suspects pulled up in a pickup truck and then opened fire. Is that no longer the belief?
So again, I'm not going to comment on that. That's up to the homicide squad to detail that information. So I'll leave that to you, Phil.
I'm sorry, can you just repeat that question, please?
Yeah, the day that we were here, I guess the day after the homicide happened, you mentioned that the two suspects pulled up in a dark-colored vehicle and then opened fire and then fled the scene. So that suggests they were already in the vehicle prior to arriving at the scene.
That is true.
Is that the same vehicle that was allegedly stolen?
We believe it to be, yes.
I appreciate the accused as a 14-year-old boy, but when you look at motive, I appreciate this as being investigated as completely a random incident. Is this gang initiation, or what's this belief at this point?
I really don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. Hopefully our investigation determines that answer, but right now I don't know what the motive is.
You said you were looking for two suspects initially. Is that still the belief? Because you spoke as if there were others, more than one other?
Correct, yeah. There's at least two suspects that we know of that are involved.
Two others, or this one and one other?
We know there's at least two involved. There could be more. And again, like I mentioned a moment ago, this investigation is far from over. There's a lot of work to do. We've had a team on this since we got called out that evening. Long hours, weekends. I've had a whole team up in this building, working angles, investigations, gathering information. So we're not done yet. We have a long way to go. And our goal is to identify who else was involved in that incident that night.
Superintendent, maybe you can speak to this. You've been doing a lot of stuff, speaking about auto theft, obviously, and the carjacking task force. And a lot of people say to me, it's often teens who are stealing cars because there's a catch and release system. And once again, we have a 14-year-old now who allegedly was involved in a stolen vehicle investigation and now 2 counts of first-degree murder. What is your comment to the fact that he's only 14?
I mean, just thinking about a 14-year-old being involved in this type of crime is unbelievable in my mind. That there's a number of questions. Where do the guns come from? The stolen vehicle. There's a lot of questions here that need to be answered, and this isn't something that we can answer right here. This is a societal issue that we as a community, as a province, as a country need to be dealing with.
Were there any firearms seized in that vehicle? I mean, we have the video that, you know, we see your 23 division officers chasing after the youth as he runs away from the scene, but was there any firearms found in that vehicle itself?
Not to my knowledge.
And staff, maybe you can comment on, he was arrested 3 weeks ago now. What was the process like the last 3 weeks, arresting this youth in connection with a stolen vehicle and now charging him with first-degree murder?
Well, we have to be careful because he is a 14-year-old male. He has rights under the Canadian law, And I don't want to talk about too much about some of the things that happened between he was arrested until today. I'd like to remain focused on the homicide investigation. Like I mentioned, our investigation has brought us to this point where we believe him to be involved, and he was arrested and charged accordingly.
Is he from this area, from the Mount Olive area?
That's something else I'd rather not comment on.
Is he cooperating with police in terms of leading you to?
Again, I
who
appreciate
else
the
might be
question.
involved?
I appreciate the question and the concern and the inquiries. But again, he does have rights, and at some point, this will become, as it reaches certain thresholds in the criminal court, publication bans will be put in place. And like I said, we're not done our investigation. There's lots that we want to do. I'm hoping that somebody watching today can call me and have some information about what happened. I'm hoping they see what's happening on the news today and offer some tidbit of information that allows us to continue and really find out what happened, and at the end of the day, bring the people responsible to justice and hopefully make the communities a little bit safer.
Can you talk about the families of the victims? Obviously, as a homicide detective, the first call you would make often is to the family of Delroy George Parks and Seymour Gibbs. Can you talk about what that conversation was like when you told them there was someone who's been charged?
I will say, as a homicide investigator, it's never easy having to tell somebody that their loved one has been taken from them. It's a horrible thing to have to go through. I can't even imagine the feelings and the emotions that they're going through. They're devastated. They're completely devastated. They've lost somebody that they loved, somebody that they cared about. Again, I've said it in the past, like this was somebody's dad, somebody's brother, somebody's son. So it's a horrible, senseless act, and it's never an easy conversation.
One more question.
This 14-year-old who you apprehended or charged, were they involved because that weekend there was a bunch of other shootings? Were they involved in some of those other shootings, or is that like part of the bigger investigation? And how are the final victims of the shooting? How are they doing?
Well, I don't want to comment on what, if any, role this person could have had in anything else. Like I said, it's an investigation. There's a lot of stuff that we'd like to recover before we come to a final conclusion. And so what was your second?
Just how the rest of the victims who were shot and who survived, how are they doing now?
Well, the ones that survived, I know one is in very serious condition. He has injuries that he's probably going to be dealing with for the rest of his life, life-altering injuries. Another two victims, they received injuries, and although they were physical, there's also mental injury. A lot of people are just devastated, like completely devastated, and like I said, it's a very difficult thing for families to go through.
Superintendent, just one question to you about those other two situations that happened in that same week where a 14-year-old boy and a 20-year-old man were randomly shot here in your division. Any update on those investigations and how those victims are doing?
So, yes, those investigations are proceeding. Certainly, we're heavily engaged in those particular investigations, but there's been no suspects arrested in either of those to this point. The victims are both doing okay, and as the detective sergeant said, it's not only physical injuries, it's the psychological injuries that go along with some of these things. So we can't minimize those types of injuries either.
Okay, that's it, guys. Thank you for coming.
Good job.
A significant update this hour from Toronto Police on that mass shooting in Rexdale. They have now made an arrest. We'll take you back to June 2nd when this happened. Police allege a group of people gathered after a soccer game. This was a large group of people, and that is when they were shot at indiscriminately. Two men from that group later died. A total of 5 people were shot. We are now learning a 14-year-old male, so a 14-year-old boy, is facing 2 counts of first-degree murder and 7 counts of attempted murder. Toronto police calling this a senseless act of violence where innocent people lost their lives. It is worth noting police believe this was a random shooting.